To be sure you never miss a Tech Ninja video, tap on the bell icon right next to subscribe. LG for the past few years has really been trying to find itself when it comes to smartphones. To me, the G2 was actually one of the best phones of its time, and it seems like ever since then, LG was really trying to find its way while catching up to the ever so popular Samsung Galaxy line. This is the LG G7 ThinQ, a rename that I didn't think was necessary, but hey, it's a start. My name is Kevin the Tech Ninja, and this is my review of the LG G7 ThinQ. At first glance, the G7 is just a typical 2018 smartphone. Pretty thin and lightweight, has dual primary cameras and a notch. The notch is slightly smaller than the iPhone Xs, and it houses the tiny speaker cutout and the front-facing camera. Also up front, you have the 6.1-inch IPS LCD panel. It's a very bright display, and if I'm being honest, it has really good viewing angles. It makes for some deeper looking blacks, meaning the always-on display takes less battery when used, and you can turn off the notch using software, and it's actually barely noticeable. And besides, the notch is not really a big deal for me, but it's nice that LG lets you make some changes to it or get rid of it completely. But in spite of LG's good effort on the display, I do feel overall that the multimedia experience is a bit lackluster. And primarily, it's the phone's lack of stereo speakers. It's just a big letdown for a flagship phone, and it's something you definitely notice. When you hold the phone in landscape, your hand will cover the speaker, and it just ruins videos for me. And while companies are getting rid of its headphone jack, LG is actually keeping the headphone jack, but they bundle in some really nice features like the Hi-Fi Quad DAC and 3D sound. Some people may say it's a gimmick, but when you plug in headphones using the Quad DAC versus plugging in headphones to something else that doesn't have a Quad DAC, there is a difference when it comes to sound. So if you're an audiophile or someone that really wants the best out of their music, then maybe you can consider this phone because it actually makes your wired headphones sound better. And 3D surround sound is actually nice when watching movies, but when I'm watching movies, I prefer to go wireless, or I prefer just to play it out of the bottom speaker. And once again, out of the bottom speaker is when you have that muffled, nasty mess, and it just makes it a really bad experience. So let's talk about the phone's hardware. It does come with a standard fingerprint scanner on the back, which works pretty good, and most phones do in 2018 now, so that's not really a big deal. You also have the volume rocker and power buttons, but you also have a dedicated button for Google Assistant. So whenever you tap this button, it takes you right to Google Assistant. If I'm being honest, it's sort of like what Samsung's doing with the Bixby, where you tap this button and it takes you to Samsung's menu. However, I rather trigger it with my voice. But with this button, you can map it to do other things, so you can do a tap to go into Google Assistant, or you can do a double tap to have it do something else, or a tap and hold. So this button is definitely useful, but for me, I didn't find myself using it. I just actually went to use the hot command instead of just tapping the button, but it is available for you to use too. Inside the phone, it comes with two variants. You have a 64GB version with 4GB of RAM, or 128 storage with 6GB of RAM. But processor-wise, you're looking at Qualcomm Snapdragon 845 all across the board. It's an octa-core chip clocked at 2.8 GHz, and that is definitely what most flagship phones have these days. With me, I have the 4GB variant on the phone, which it's very speedy, and I know the 6GB variant would be a little bit faster with switching between apps, but this day and age, 4GB is plenty for many users. I would say even every user out there. 6GB is a lot, and sometimes the software dictates the memory usage better than hardware anyway, so it's really not a big deal. Now, multitasking with heavy applications isn't as quite as smooth because you have to reload the apps quite often, because the LG UX, while it's improved, it still isn't the leanest. Sometimes it gets in its way, and it's just a quite bit different from the stock experience, and it pauses here and there. And even going into the menus, there's so many options in the settings, and it just sort of comes to be a bit heavy and bloated. Really not a fan of it. But it is running Android 8.0, which is the latest version of Android, and I'm pretty sure they'll get software updates, at least one major software update going forward. Now, LG does include its ThinQ software, which gives it better connection to its ThinQ products, but if you're not invested in the ThinQ ecosystem, then it's sort of weird. And also, if I have a washing machine that supports ThinQ, would that make me go out and buy the LG ThinQ? I just don't know how that correlates to me directly, but I think if you do have the washing machine and you have the phone and they're both on the same frequency, then they could talk to each other, communicate, saying that your laundry's done or anything like that. But without having that to fully test it, it's hard for me to comment on. Now, aside from that software getting in the way, it feels like a regular Android phone. It's durable enough with Gorilla Glass 5 protection and the aluminum chassis, and the IP68 water and dust resistant comes in handy, and it also has the MIL STD 810 compliance, which means it can take a drop or two with no problems. But that does not prevent fingerprints, so what I recommend doing, especially if you don't like fingerprints, get a D-brand skin. I keep this on most of my phones, and I just like D-brand skins. You can also jazz up your phone a little bit. You can get the dragon skin or the camel. Those are my two favorite colors. Hit the link down below to D-brand your phone. Now, one trick up its sleeve for daily use is, of course, face recognition. It's handy, but it's not on the level of the likes of OnePlus 6 or the iPhone 10. And most of the time, I do end up using the fingerprint scanner on the back. I just find it easier. Now, speaking of back, that's where you find the dual cameras. They're both 16 megapixels with different apertures, an f1.6 and an f1.9. In traditional LG style, you do have a regular lens and you have the wide angle lens, which is more of a fisheye look. Now, on top of that, you have a portrait mode too. But I didn't find the portrait mode nearly as appealing as it is on the Pixel. It's very similar to Samsung. It does over soften the skin and it does make things a bit brighter, and sometimes you have washed out backgrounds when doing it. But overall, I do like the wide angle lens. Landscape pictures are really nice. Anything that you want to get a huge perspective of, I really dig that camera. But I do find the pictures at night really suffer. There's a lot of detailed miss. Things look really muddy very fast. And it's just disappointing. It seems like LG hasn't changed their camera much in a couple years, while the likes of the Pixel and Samsung has made big changes to their camera, while the Pixel is actually probably the best camera that you can buy on any phone right now. So that's always going to be the bar for me. Otherwise, the front-facing camera did get a megapixel boost over the 5 megapixel from last year, so you do get a stronger selfie. Once again, still think it's a little lacking, but it's a decent selfie and you get some decent pictures, but dynamic range definitely needs some assistance too. A lot of times you'll get the blown out background, or sometimes when it's too dark, it just washes everything out. Now, for video recording, it does support 4K at 30 frames per second, and video looks really, really good to me. I've always been a fan of LG stabilization, and this one is no slouch either. I'm a big fan of LG's video, so I really enjoy the 4K, and to me it looks really good. There is slow motion, but it's not the super slow motion that you've seen before, but it's slow enough to kind of get the idea across of what you're trying to make slow. If I'm being honest, the camera's pretty average, and this pretty much goes around the whole phone. Everything is average, even battery life. Standby battery is pretty disappointing. In day-to-day use, you'll get a day, you'll eke a day, but you'll be looking for your charger at night, definitely. The phone does support the faster Quick Charge 3.0 and the USB-C port on the bottom, and the USA variant has wireless charging. International version does not wirelessly charge for whatever reason that is. But anyways, that's my take on the LG G7 ThinQ. It's hard to recommend this phone when we're seeing so many good flagship phones and even budget phones that I think are a little bit better. I think LG's main aim with this phone is to keep the wheel rolling in the market and only hope for something next year that's a lot better. I think the LG does miss the mark, especially with the subpar camera and the lack of things that just make a phone really nice. But anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed watching this video. I'm Kevin the Tech Ninja. Have a great day, and I'll let you guys later.